Hello, I'm Gus Downing, the publisher and editor of the D&D Daily, and this is the LP News Network. And today we have with us Scott Sanford, the Director of Investigations and Training at Barnes & Noble, and also an industry subject matter expert in organized retail crime. Scott's been very involved in the national effort for many years, and even helped develop a software program, the ORC Workbench, that helps identify potential online sellers of stolen merchandise. He's spoken at numerous trade shows, industry ORC conferences, and has an absolute unique gift and ability to resolve ORC cases. And we wanted to spend a few minutes with him and get his thoughts about where the industry is going, how we're making progress at fighting this North American epidemic. Thanks, Scott, for being with us today.
Welcome, Gus.
Scott, first, I'd like to ask you, if you look at ORC from an industry perspective, how big is it? Is it growing? And if it is, what do you think the primary reasons for the growth is?
Well, it's tough to really put a dollar figure on it, Gus. I know there's a figure that's floated around for years, and certainly it's in the billions, but that's a moving target, and it's forever changing. But certainly it's very big. The primary reasons for ORC and the continued growth, and yes, it is growing, I think starts with, number one, what we've seen anyhow, is the drug epidemic in the country. Mm-hmm. A lot of what we deal with are drug addicts, primarily meth and heroin addictions, which drives it fuels the theft in retail stores. Retail theft is a nonviolent crime, and unfortunately the punishment doesn't necessarily fit the crime. Okay. Something else we've seen over the last 5-6 years, when the recession hit, and it hit hard, there was a lot of people that were displaced. People that were not your typical shoplifter. They may have been an opportunist that periodically stole every once in a while, not too often, but they panicked when they lost their jobs. And they perhaps had an online account with an online auction house. And they found an opportunity to augment their income and help pay the bills. And for many, what we learned, because we've taken out hundreds of them, is that it became a very lucrative deal. I mean, it's probably one of the easier ways to become instantly wealthy.
So that they can then take that merchandise, sell it online, and create a cash flow, an income.
Create a cash flow, an income, and the ease and anonymity that comes with that, Gus. It's not the person that would typically steal from stores and then sell it out of the trunk of their vehicle or at a flea market. It takes a little more work. But to sell it online from your house, that's a completely different story.
And the out of the trunk is really the old school method.
Yes.
And now with the internet proliferation and such, it's much easier for them to sell it anywhere around the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So you've got a worldwide customer base, in fact. So in some of what they sell, they make pretty good margin on that as well. So we've seen that occur over the years, and they're not people you'd expect. We've interviewed attorneys. We've interviewed school teachers, a Baptist minister, some very educated people that, they breathe the same air we do, they bleed the same red blood. You'd never look at them twice in any given store. And I like to think that we've got pretty good awareness in our stores. I probably wouldn't look at these people twice. Some of them are very good at what they do, Gus.
But they figured out a method to get the merchandise out of the store, go home, sell it online, or sell it at the flea markets. And that we've seen a significant increase over the last 5, 6, 7 years, correct?
Exactly, yeah. So what we've done is we've categorized our shoplifting base as far as the organized retail crime events go. One of two ways. It's either your addict or your more clever
quasi-professional.
But they didn't come from that school. They were unearthed during the recession, and we've seen a lot of that. And by the way, a lot of these folks that we interview, they're hitting multiple retailers for millions of dollars, by the way.
Well, and some of that, from our own experience publishing the Daily, we've seen the drug cartels in Mexico involved. We've seen the organized crime groups from Russia and Eastern Europe involved here in the States. So it's basically a gambit of then 3 groups the drug addiction folks,
Yes.
the professionals that were displaced in the recession, and then we have the professionals, which are really the drug cartels, organized gangs, and so on.
You're correct in that statement, yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So,
But in addition to that, there's other drivers of organized retail crime. Let's look at the crime itself and the punishment. We've interviewed people that have 10, 15, 20 or more shoplifting convictions under their belt, yet they've never been tried as a habitual. And many of these shoplifting events are considered misdemeanor events. They've never been charged as a felon either. You look what's happened over the years. A lot of states have actually tried to raise the felony threshold. In fact, I think that's occurring in Florida right now. They're considering raising the felony threshold from $300 to perhaps $600. And there's a lot of flexing between states on that figure right now. But if I'm a bad guy and I want to steal $500 of merchandise and that falls under the felony threshold, I can do that all day long.
Well, that has to do with a lot of the states being broke.
Exactly.
So they're trying to raise it so they don't have to spend as much money in the judicial system.
Absolutely.
Right.
And we interview these folks. We talk to them and find out some of them, first time they're caught shoplifting, they may have stolen 200, 300 times before they finally get caught.
Right.
And then they get that slap on the wrist. There is really no deterrent to not doing it again. That's kind of comes with the turf, and they just wise up from that point. In fact,
Right.
I think there's some statistics floating around out there from, I believe it may have been the National Retail Security Survey years ago, that said that accepted figure was 48 times before they're caught the first time. And I think that the second time after that is 200 times. So
the first time somebody is caught, they're on their 48th
time
incident.
Yes, incident, yes.
And the second grouping is 200th
Yes.
incident.
But again, I've interviewed people that have done it 2,000, 3,000 times and never been caught.
Jeez.
And again, this is with multiple retailers. They've gone on for years. But again, you have to look at these folks, and they don't telegraph their activity as well as some. So it really does take a heightened awareness within your retail group.
Now, if you look at the retailer's response to ORC over, let's say, the last 5 years, how would you characterize it? I mean, what have we done over the last 5 years to fight this problem as an industry?
Well, clearly the industry's evolved, Gus. There have been a change in the way departments are organizing themselves now. There are some departments that have literally went and carved out sub-departments that handle ORC solely, while as other departments have, taken 2 or 3 people and have them babysit, for lack of a better term, the organized retail crime efforts within the organization. Some other departments haven't addressed it at all. But overall, I think there's been clearly a heightened awareness. The industry spoke, and you go to any trade show event nowadays, and on the docket you see the breakout sessions are dominated by ORC presentations.
Yeah, whereas 5 years ago they weren't.
Yeah, exactly.
And we have seen a few hundred jobs created as a result of this.
Absolutely.
Regretfully, but nonetheless a necessity.
Absolutely.
Okay. Now, we now have over 30 different ORC associations around the country, and they really have been growing over the last few years. How effective have they been, and how can we improve our performance as an industry and as individual retailers? And for those of you that don't know what an ORC association is, it's a group in a particular market in a city where the public law enforcement community, the police officers and federal folks get together with the retailers, form an association to fight this problem, to work together to solve the issue. So that's an association. I apologize, Scott.
That's okay.
But there's 30 associations now around the country. How effective have they been, and what can we do to make them better?
Well, first, the ORCAs have definitely been a success, bridging the gap between law enforcement, the district attorney's office, and retail loss prevention, retail in general. They've been a huge success. And I'd like to take a moment. I'd like to thank my peers in this industry. Look at George Torres from CVS, Kevin Plant, many folks from Target, and other retailers that have taken the forefront in working with law enforcement partners to develop these ORCAs. That's not an easy job, and they do this on top of their regular day job. So I'd like to pay tribute to all those fine folks that have done that. In regards to making them better, I think that they are evolving. I remember going to some of the first ORCA events years ago. And at that time, some of the law enforcement personnel that were at those events were skeptical. But it grew. I think it's
As were some of the loss prevention executives.
Yeah, I'll give you that. Absolutely. Yeah, some of them are still skeptics to this day, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
But the reality is, I think that the cohesion between those two groups, it was inevitable. You know, law enforcement realized that they're dealing with a much more professional class than they initially gave credit to, and they also realized that they could learn something from the retail sector. And the retail sector soon learned who they could count on to be there for them when they have a case that they're working. You know, as far as making it better, just getting more involvement from the retailers. You know, we're all busy. I make it a point to attend several every year myself. You know, I will never miss La Orca out there in Southern California. That's been a fantastic event, and that's a classic example of.
This is the largest in the nation.
It is the largest, and it's been used as a model for many others to follow suit. So, you know, I look forward to visiting others this year in 2014 that have not yet
Chief Ray Schultz in Albuquerque, the man that, quite frankly, pioneered the model itself back in 2006, I believe.
Sure, you're right. You're correct in saying that. Absolutely. So, you know, I think that there's definitely a lot more that we can do through that by inviting perhaps members of the National District Attorneys Association. Although some of the events I went to, I've seen representation from the DA's office. I think that we've got a lot more room for improvement on that front as well.
Good point.
Yeah, absolutely.
So over the last few years, we've seen dozens of states enact ORC laws, and certainly that's helped. But how long do you think it'll be before all the states have laws about ORC, and hopefully the federal government does as well?
Well, you're correct. There's been a lot of states that have passed those bills over the years, Gus, and I've dealt with a few of them and had cases worked under those new bills. Your guess is as good as mine how long it's going to take for all 50 states. You know, I think it kind of goes back to something I was saying earlier as far as the primary reasons. States are confined, budgetary confinements, and you know, they're shrinking the DA's office at times, they're shrinking law enforcement. You look at AB 109 out in California, which called for the early release of inmates. How long before other jurisdictions do the same thing?
Which, by the way, in California with that particular law that released, I think, 10,000 plus criminals early release from prison. Already, just a week and a half ago, California put in the papers that they have seen an increase in property crimes since that release dates.
Exactly, yeah.
So
the thing with that is, and not to get off track here, but I think it's important to talk about this. I think a lot of people saw that coming. If they're going to release the prisoners, they have to have a plan in effect that's going to help reduce recidivism as well.
Right.
I believe Florida might be looking at something similar right now. And it's my understanding, some studying I've done, that upwards of 27% of all inmates who are released in the state of Florida right now find themselves back in prison within 24 months. So what can be done on the front end to help reduce that? I think that's very important. And because it's the nonviolent crimes that are being given the consideration of being released, well, it stands to reason that retailers are going to be a victim once again. So I can tell you from personal experience, we've seen it hit our stores as well. Going back to the ORC bills, it seems to me that because of that need to make budget, for lack of a better term, I do believe that the ORC bill is a great opportunity for states. And hopefully, if we continue this path where they're going to conduct early release of inmates, that they put a little more thought into it and what they're going to do on the front end to ensure that these prisoners are given every opportunity not to turn back and commit crimes and end back in the same place. So that's beyond me, though.
So what would your advice be for the industry? How do we get better at this?
Well, you know, I think that we've come a long way, as I said, in the last 5 years, Gus. But you look at where you're currently at within your career. If you're a regional LP manager, director, you can be a director or even a VP. And what do you really know about organized retail crime? You know, I consider myself to be very well versed. 8 years ago, I was not very well versed. It was learning as I went along. And I think that as an industry, there's a need to create some type of certification training where people can learn how to properly investigate.
Good point.
And by the way, there's more than one business model for investigating organized retail crime. You know, we have a unique approach at Barnes & Noble. The knock and talk approach that is common in law enforcement, well, that's just part of it, by the way.
Knock and talk?
Yeah.
I like that.
Where, you know, we'll develop cases very quickly. I don't see a need investigating someone for a year and closing the case that way. You know, we're a specialty retailer, so we have to cover a lot of ground quickly. And I think a lot of specialty retailers are in the same boat. You know, you cannot afford to take a body and put them on a case for 6 months or a year, because too much is happening elsewhere while you're devoted to that one group.
I understand.
So we have learned over the years that you can very quickly assemble a case. And through what you learn in Wickler and Zalowski, or John Reed and Associates on how to conduct an interview, that can transcend into an external theft interview. And these people, if it's a drug addict, they very easily give up their co-conspirators. They very easily give up their offense. They will very easily put it in writing and give you a videotape confession. You can take that information and you can reverse engineer that case, Gus. So when they tell you that they've stolen $500,000 in the last 2 years from these 12 stores, and this is where they sold it, and this is who they acted in collusion with, and everything else, well, you've got those inventory records that can corroborate that statement.
Sure.
And you package it all together and you build a world-class narrative on that and you present that to law enforcement. We've been highly successful prosecuting these cases.
Well, which means, gets back to your comment about the certification potential for ORC investigation.
Exactly. Now, there are times that we'll take and investigate the traditional method that a lot of retailers use this day as well. So what can retailers do? Be open to other investigative approaches.
There you go.
I also think that collaborating with other retailers.
Understood.
You know, and one big thing I think that we as an industry can do is we can try to continue to push the online auction houses. You know, eBay has set a fantastic example that other online auction houses have to, or should rather, follow. You know, I remember back in the day, all the negative press eBay was getting, but we eventually, you know, worked through that, now they are a great partner with retail, and without their assistance, we would not have closed nearly the number of cases that we've closed. So, you know, a lot of good things have come from all this.
Thanks, Scott.
You're very welcome.
Well, that's it for this episode of the LP News Network. I'd like to thank you for watching. And like I always like to say, let's keep them safe out there.